Welcome everyone to another episode of Pop Rant Radio, the podcast where two pop culture junkies discuss popular and sometimes not so popular culture. My name is Moss, I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is my good friend and co-host, Eric. How are you today, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing really well. You know why?
Why?
Because we're going to talk about my favorite movie of all time today.
Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen.
Exactly. So the movie opens... No.
John Turturro's in it, though.
So recently, and this is kind of coincidental because I've been wanting to talk about The Rocketeer. The Rocketeer from 1991.
Or from 2018.
Is my favorite movie of all time. And it's going to be my birthday this week. So I wanted to talk about this. I've wanted to talk about it for a while now.
I'm screwed till December?
Yes,
this
exactly.
Was the partnership deal.
That's how it goes. And also, coincidentally, they announced that they're going to do a sequel/reboot to The Rocketeer.
And they're giving it the Ghostbusters treatment,
I guess.
I've heard.
It's going to be, supposedly it's going to take place a few years later. Original movie takes place right before World War II. And this one's going to take place a few years later during the Cold War. And it's going to star an African-American female who takes up the mantle of the Rocketeer.
I hope it's just Wanda Sykes. And it's just Wanda Sykes, just with that helmet on. Just, man, what am I going to do today? Just like spouting off classic Wanda Sykes lines.
We'll see. But that's not what we're here to talk about today. That was just kind of a coincidence.
Yeah, it was weird because we mentioned this a long time ago about doing this.
Yeah.
And then this week it shows up all over like different comic book websites about Rocketeer getting a reboot remake.
A lot of people are like posting to my Facebook like, what do you think about this? Because everybody who knows me knows my favorite movie is The Rocketeer. And
there was just a collective sigh in the text box for everyone that posted it.
We'll see. I'm not really excited. Like The Rocketeer from '91 is just, it's my favorite movie standalone. Like it never had any sequels. They were planned sequels, but the original movie didn't do well enough for that. Whether they do a remake or a reboot or a sequel or whatever, like, I don't care. I still get my favorite movie.
Right.
So that's what we're going to talk about today, the 1991 Disney film,
What?
The Rocketeer. And Disney, they didn't really put their name on any of the advertising because they thought it would cause people to think like, oh, it's a kid's movie or that sort of thing. So Disney did not advertise its name on this movie,
which is strange because it's very kid friendly. Like there's nothing in it that is like kids shouldn't watch this.
Right. It's very like Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah,
like
it's kind of just a hero.
It's
movie.
fairly family friendly and it's like loosely based on the comic book by Dave Stevens.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's Pirates of the Caribbean. You know, it's just kind of a movie that the whole family, quote unquote, can enjoy. So
Pirates of the Caribbean's a little raunchy and a little shitty.
I mean, the first one's all right.
First is fine. I like
first one's all right. First one's enjoyable.
Stop after that.
Yeah, that's the end. So for those of you who are unaware, The Rocketeer was originally a comic book written by a guy named Dave Stevens. And the premise of The Rocketeer is the Rocketeer, Cliff Secord, he's kind of like this stunt hotshot pilot. Right before World War II in 1938. And he discovers a rocket pack, a jet pack. And he uses that and he becomes the Rocketeer. And he's a hero and he goes around, he fights bad guys, rescues people, and the good old, classic superhero stuff.
Classic khaki pants.
Yes. And he's got his classic, what do they call with the bowled out, like...
Parachute pants?
Yeah, they're not parachute pants, but they're like that where they're like jockey pants.
He's got that weird like leather chest piece.
Yeah, and the jacket that he has like the leather. For my money... absolute favorite like superhero costume.
It's iconic.
Ever. Yeah, it's the helmet.
Especially the helmet.
Yes. For anyone who's familiar with our Facebook or Twitter page, our cover photo has a bunch of like pop culture gear. And on the right-hand side is the Rocketeer helmet.
Yep. That
is the crown jewel of my pop culture nerd collection of stuff. Yeah, I love it. It's my absolute favorite thing that I own. So anyway, as you're going to find out throughout this entire podcast, I unabashedly love this movie, and I won't shut up about it. So you're in for a ride.
That's why I'm going to take the lead.
So strap on your rocket pack.
Let me take the lead on this episode. You can add
all right, I'll stop talking now. You just go.
I'll go to the plot.
So again, the movie is kind of a loose adaptation. They definitely changed some things to make the movie a little more family friendly.
Right.
Specifically, like Cliff Secord's girlfriend from the comics is very much kind of like a sex icon. Very like Betty Page style.
She's kind of like a, what is it called? The pin-ups.
Yeah, like a pinup girl. Yeah. Exactly. And in the movie, his girlfriend's played by Jennifer Connelly, who if you weren't in love with Jennifer Connelly before this movie, you will be, because I saw this when I was a really young kid, but like Jennifer Connelly in this movie was definitely my first crush for sure. Like she's young in this movie and she's just gorgeous,
it wasn't
man.
Alan Arkin?
It was not Alan Arkin. He was my second crush. Alan Arkin's in this movie. Everybody's in this movie. It's great. Yeah. So before we get started, if you've never seen this movie, The Rocketeer, I would highly recommend that you watch it. Obviously, like I said, it's my favorite movie of all time.
I'd give it a B-.
And there are a couple twists that we're eventually going to get into for the spoilers section later on.
Right.
But if you haven't seen this movie, I would highly, highly recommend that you watch it and then come back and listen to this episode so you can understand why we both love this movie so much.
And we both own it, so come and ask us to borrow it if you don't want to find it.
Really, from the very first scene, like one of the reasons that I love this movie, not only was it my absolute favorite movie as a kid, I used to watch it with my dad all the time, so I have a lot of nostalgia built around it, but specifically like the craft, the construction, and like the screenplay of this movie is so perfect.
It's really spotless.
Yes, and it's really encapsulated by this opening scene. So the movie opens on an airfield, and hotshot pilot Cliff Secord, our main character, and his best friend Peavy, played by Alan Arkin.
Right.
Cliff Secord is played by Bill Campbell, who didn't go on to do a lot of things.
Right. Not like Bruce Campbell.
Not like Bruce Campbell. But if there's one thing that rewatching this movie like really gets across every time, Bill Campbell, circa 1991, is Nathan Drake from Uncharted.
Yeah.
Like, he looks exactly like him.
Smart ass.
Yeah.
He's gutsy. He's a hothead.
Yes. Like, there's one shot towards the beginning of the movie where when the FBI guys show up and Cliff is like walking behind him, like he looks exactly like Nathan Drake, like costume and everything. It's crazy. So Cliff Secord and Peavy are walking out to the plane that they just finished building, the GB, beautiful yellow race plane. And they've just spent years of their life like tuning it up. Cliff Secord is going to fly the plane in the Nationals, which is a giant race that's coming up. He plans on winning. He's going to make some money. And he's going to do really well for himself. So they're going to do a test flight. Right from the get-go, Cliff and Peavy are walking out to the plane, and Peavy's like, all right, it's our first flight. Like, don't try anything too crazy. And Cliff's like, who, me? And like, we instantly get a sense of who these characters are.
Right.
Like, they're friends, they're joking. Peavy's talking about how Cliff is kind of this hotshot pilot, and Cliff is kind of sarcastic, kind of what you said, kind of charming. So he gets in the plane, and there's a picture of his girlfriend, Jenny, played by Jennifer Connelly, a little snapshot of her that he carries around with him, a little Polaroid before Polaroids.
Yeah, it's probably cost a lot of money.
Yeah, it's probably not exactly period accurate, but it's there. So he has this little photograph of her that he puts in the plane. And this photograph is super, super important for what's coming up. Like this photograph is going to be like a microcosm of how well this movie tells its story. He gets in the plane, he takes off, he's flying around, the guys are all excited at the airfield, and he like swoops down low and does kind of a trick where he does a low fly, and all the guys are like, oh man, this is great. So again, we as the audience get to see, all right, Cliff Secord, he's clearly, a crack pilot, like he knows what he's doing. We get a sense of who these characters are 30 seconds into the film, and it's so well done. Meanwhile, down below on the ground, there's these two criminals, these two mobsters, and they are in a car chase with two FBI agents. FBI agents chasing after the mobsters. They're shooting back and forth at each other, chasing each other through these fields, and as one of the mobsters takes his Tommy gun and starts shooting at the FBI guys, he looks up and he sees Cliff Secord's plane flying over, the GB. And so just on a whim, he shoots his Tommy gun at the plane, and the plane takes a bunch of bullets and it starts to go down. The oil and everything, the fuel starts to like leak onto the windshield. So Cliff like punches through the windshield. Again, we get to see like he's quick thinking, like he's thinking on his feet. He's reacting to the situation. The car that the mobsters are in, it pulls away from the FBI guys briefly. They go into one of the airplane hangars at the airfield, and one of the mob guys, he's dead. He got shot by the FBI. And the other guy, he has a package that he hides in one of the planes.
Right.
Meanwhile, Cliff Secord's plane crashes, and he gets out okay, but the plane's on fire. PV and the boys, they all get him out quickly. And as Cliff's like running away, he goes back to grab the picture of Jenny out of the plane.
Right.
So again, visually, we are set up with the fact that clearly, like, this picture's important to him, Jenny's important to him. We get some character building and some background, just all visually. Again, and this is the first 6-7 minutes of the movie.
Yeah, it's really well set up.
Yes, and beyond that, like, the tone of this movie is, we mentioned it before, like, it's very Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, it's clearly a period piece, but it's kind of like based on like a movie serial, and it's having fun with the idea. Like, ultimately, it's a comic book movie,
as you will find out in a little bit.
Yeah,
a certain character,
but it doesn't, and it's a little cheesy. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, it is absolutely,
but it's not like super over the top. It doesn't have like crazy physics or anything like that. Like, it's not guys punching each other flying across the room. Like, it's got this nice tone where it's grounded, but it's still having fun.
Right.
And that tone never wavers throughout the entire film, and it's so perfect. So it turns out that these two mobsters, they stole a rocket pack.
Right.
And who did they steal it from? They stole
Leonardo
it
DiCaprio.
from Howard Hughes, played by Terry O'Quinn, who everybody knows from Lost at this point.
Right.
But he plays Howard Hughes. So Howard...
Freak Out.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, Howard Hughes.
What was the enormous movie he made with that like cost millions of dollars back then? Had all the planes, and it was like a giant war film.
Yeah, it was Hell's Angels, maybe.
Yeah, or something
like that. Yeah, so it's
pre that.
Yeah,
Howard
it's
Hughes.
fictional, like non-crazy Howard Hughes.
I'm Howard Hughes.
Exactly.
With cigar in his mouth and everything.
Howard Hughes, famous aviation genius, designed the rocket pack in the movie. So an example of where they take some actual people and some actual events, and they kind of incorporate it into this like fictionalized history,
right?
Which is one of my favorite genres by far. When you take details of history and you kind of incorporate it into a fictionalized story.
That's why you love the Titanic.
Absolutely. I guess the animated one.
Yes.
Where the whale drags the Titanic.
The
Titanic.
Yes. The octopus saves the ship.
Oh, the octopus. That's right. So from the opening scene, we get, all right, the FBI is searching for this rocket pack that was made by Howard Hughes. These mobsters stole it.
Right.
The mobster guys hid it in the hangar inside one of the planes, but Cliff and Peavy, they don't know that yet. Meanwhile, their plane that they just spent years making, all busted up, got shot down, crashed. Now they owe money to the guy who owns the airfield because a gas tanker was also destroyed in the accident. So The guy who owns the airfield's like, you owe me the money. They're way behind. They can't fly in the Nationals.
They can't compete.
They cannot do everything they had planned. So again, we have a setup. We understand that our main characters are now in a situation where everything they've been working towards for years, no longer an option.
Down the drain.
Planes destroyed. Now they owe a bunch of money. But we have an idea of who our main characters are. We know what the rocket pack is. We know who's after it, but we don't know why they're after it yet.
Right.
Cut to Neville Sinclair, Hollywood actor.
Timothy Dalton.
Played by Timothy Dalton, my man.
Best James Bond.
My man, Timothy Dalton. All right, so Timothy Dalton, Neville Sinclair in this movie, he's very much like an Errol Flynn, like Hollywood actor.
Yeah, he steals the show in a lot of ways.
He very much does, and he's the villain of our movie because he's the one looking for the rocket, and he's the one working with the mob.
Right.
Who's
Eddie Valentine.
Eddie Valentine, Paul Sorvino.
Yes.
Classic, man. Like just
every 90s film.
Straight out of Goodfellas,
Yep.
like Paul Sorvino. So Paul Sorvino is the head of the mob, Eddie Valentine, and he's like, why are you looking for the rocket? Why do you want this thing? And Neville Sinclair's like, you don't worry, I'll pay you triple the money. You just have to get me that rocket. Cool. And a bunch of other stuff happens as far as like where the rocket is and how they find out about it. But the brilliant thing about this movie and its screenplay and its storytelling is that every scene has a domino effect into the next scene.
Yeah, there is no scene in this that you feel like you can trim out.
Yeah, everything moves the story forward. It reminds me very much of like the guys that created South Park, Trey Parker and Matt Stone. They have like a seminar, like a storytelling talk where they do where like anything that happens in your story, the next thing that happens should be a direct result of what just came before.
Right, or setting up something that's going to be affected by that or affect that in the future.
Exactly. And this movie is like the prime example of that because everything sets up something else or domino effects into the next scene.
Right, which Linklater needs to learn. the director Linklater is someone that does not do this at all.
There's a lot of directors that need to learn this.
He's my numero uno on my shit list.
And not every film needs to be like exactly linear. Like there's definitely room for experimentation, but The Rocketeer is like the prime example of storytelling 101 in your movie.
Are you saying it's not as good as what was the one that he made where it changes the story every 5 minutes?
Oh,
Is it Slacker?
Slacker. Yeah, Slacker.
You're saying Rocketeer is better than Slacker?
I am saying unequivocally Rocketeer is better than Slacker.
Are you sure?
Well, meanwhile, Cliff and Peavy are talking about how, well, now we have to, do this clown act. So we have to get in the old plane, Miss Mabel. So when Cliff, he puts his picture of Jenny into that plane, and as he jumps in it, there's something under the seat, and they find the rocket pack. They find out what it is, and they decide, we can make some real money off of this. Like, you'd pay to see a man fly, wouldn't you? No one's ever seen this kind of thing before. Meanwhile, we get introduced to Jenny Blake, Cliff Secord's girlfriend.
Finally.
They go on a date, they go to see a movie, and they go to see a movie starring Neville Sinclair.
Yep.
Who's going to end up being our villain for the movie.
Oh, Spoilers.
Spoilers. I think I already said it anyway. But
you haven't given away the twist yet.
So again, exactly. So another thing that gets set up to where, hey, the actor that's going to be in the movie we're going to go see, he's set up early in the film before he's super introduced and we find out everything about him.
Right, and Jenny clearly is like, he's a hotshot. He's like the John Wayne of the time. Or,
yeah.
Like, she's like swooing over him, and she's like, oh, look how talented he is. I'd love to work with him, blah, blah, blah.
And Cliff Secord's like, he's all right, I guess.
Like, whatever, it's a movie.
And when they go into the movie theater, there's an advertisement before the movie showing the Hindenburg, like the Zeppelin, flying over the ocean and stopping by the United States. Right. And remember, this is 1938. The U.S. is not involved in fighting Germany yet.
Right, but Nazis exist.
And we get a little bit of banter from Cliff to where they're talking about, oh yeah, the Zeppelin's coming and it brings peace to the world. And Cliff's like, nah, they want their piece of the world. Like, we get the sense that Cliff, he doesn't like Nazis.
Right. That'd be a great twist.
A little bit of a setup here.
Cliff
a little bit of a setup.
Nazi sympathizer.
So on Cliff and Jenny's date, Jenny finds out that the GB crashed. And she's upset because she was the last person to find out that Cliff was in danger and that Cliff really never tells her anything.
He hid this from her.
Yeah, he hid it from her because he didn't want to ruin her evening, but she was made a fool out of because everybody else knew when they were going on their date, when they were at the diner. And so she gets kind of angry with him and she leaves.
But did he hide it from character actor Margot Martindale?
He did not hide it from character actor Margot Martindale.
Who runs... What is it? It's the Bulldog Cafe?
Yeah, it's like something like that. It's a big diner and it's shaped like a giant bulldog.
I think it's like a bulldog on like a fire hydrant or something like that.
Yeah. Like it's classic. A big old sign that says "Eats" outside and like just classic 1930s diner stuff.
Small, like hole in the wall, mom and pop owned.
For sure. Oh, and by the way, like the soundtrack to this movie. Oh, it's so good.
It's very classic.
James Horner, by far, I think his absolute best work. Like
better than the Titanic?
Such a fantastic... Is it?
It is.
Oh, it is?
Yeah.
Yes, better than the Titanic.
Don't question my James Horner knowledge.
Don't question it.
He also did Amazing Spider-Man. It was all right.
Fair enough. Rest in peace, James Horner.
Yes.
But yeah, his best work, I think. Like, or at least definitely my favorite. So Jenny kind of gets mad at Cliff, storms off. So the next day, Cliff goes to visit Jenny on set because Jenny is an aspiring actress.
Right, he's going to make amends.
And of course, she's working on the new Neville Sinclair movie.
Right, which is like this weird, over-the-top, like...
It's very much like a Robin Hood.
It's like a Renaissance piece.
Yes.
But it's like this classic just film set where he like swings in on a rope.
Yes.
He's like, aha!
Yeah,
and, like,
it's very overacted. Like, it's very reminiscent of the Errol Flynn Adventures of Robin Hood.
Right.
Like, it's clearly, I think, a reference to that movie.
But I think still with like a tongue-in-cheek reference like Men in Tights.
For sure. Even though this was before Men in Tights.
Right.
But it's played comedically, for sure.
Yeah, because Timothy Dalton's doing like his, I got you now!
He's definitely chewing the scenery, for sure.
He's
for sure. So Cliff goes to see Jenny to tell her, hey, we found this rocket pack.
Right.
And Neville Sinclair, who we know is looking for the rocket pack, he overhears this.
He's dropping.
But he doesn't see Cliff during the scene. Like, he's behind like the set wall.
Right.
So Cliff leaves. So Neville Sinclair swoops into Jenny, who's now upset because Cliff got her fired from the closed set production.
Knocks over like a whole
comedically accidentally knocks over wall of the set. So Neville Sinclair swoops in. He's like, hey, I'm Neville Sinclair. We should go on a date. I'll take you to the fancy club. Simultaneously, he's going to get information on where that rocket pack is.
Right.
So again, everything is just really neatly tied together and everything kind of flows into each other. Like, I love this movie so much. So the mob guys, they figure out from the mob guy that survived, that hit the rocket, he goes into the hospital.
Right.
And so the other mob guys find out from him the rocket was hidden in a hangar in this old airfield. When the mob arrives and they're searching the airfield, they search the plane and they don't find the rocket, but they find the picture of Jenny.
Right.
Cool. So the mob determines this girl probably knows the guy who found the rocket. So we have to keep an eye out for this girl. Again, this photograph will come into play again. So we get a scene where Cliff Secord, as the Rocketeer, the first time he takes out the rocket pack, he has to save another guy,
a drunkard,
who's flying a stunt plane, and he ends up saving him from that. But during this scene, we get to see Cliff Secord. He doesn't know exactly what he's doing.
Yeah,
like
he busts through the bottom of the plane.
Yeah, busts through the bottom of the plane, and like he doesn't know necessarily exactly how to fly. Like we see him struggle. So Cliff Secord, again, kind of going back to like the whole Nathan Drake thing. Like he's very charming, but he's not perfect. Like he makes mistakes, and that's part of why he's such a great hero. Is because he's not like the super, dashing strong man.
He's incredibly relatable.
Yeah, he's your everyman. Like he really, really is. There's a scene at the nightclub where Neville Sinclair takes Jenny out on a date. Cliff has to go to the club to try and save her because he knows that she's in danger.
Right.
Well, the reason that he finds out that she's at the club is that back at the diner, the mob guys figure out via the picture of Jenny and via asking around that Cliff Secord, the girl in the picture's boyfriend, hangs out at this diner. So the mob guys go to investigate the diner. And they kind of rough up the place and they ask some questions. And then they find out, hey, the guy that we're working for, Neville Sinclair, he's taken the girl from the photograph on a date to the club. What's going on? So they go to the club to investigate, but they leave two guys behind.
Right.
And Cliff's there at the bar along with PV and the gang. And the mob guy's like, stay here. We're going to be here a while. And he goes over to investigate a bunch of pictures on the wall. And he's like, hey, you, talking about Cliff, like, you're up here, look at this. And he sees a picture of him and Jenny. That's quite a dish you got there. Wait a minute, that's Lady Luck, the girl from the picture. So what's great is that we, the audience, the mobster, and the other characters in the scene, we all make the connection at the same time. Hey, this guy's going to realize from the picture who this girl is, which is going to tell him who Cliff is, because he didn't know what he looked like until he saw the picture.
But he knows who has the rocket pack.
Exactly. So
it's like the unmasking scene.
Exactly, but it's so brilliantly set up. This little thing, this little picture of Jenny from the very, very beginning of the movie ultimately goes and arcs over the entire course of this movie and ends up being very, very important to the plot, set up an hour later. Like, it's so well done. And that's this entire movie. This entire movie is setup, payoff. Right. Scene after scene after scene. It's so well done. Again, I know I said it before, but every scene really domino effects into the next scene afterwards.
Right.
It's such a perfect screenplay. I love it so much.
Yeah, because there's a lot, like almost everything that is said or everything that has a point in this comes back or resolves.
Yes.
In the end, there's a lot of like things that hint towards future things.
Yeah, even like little one-liners really come back into play later on in the movie.
Right.
So a lot of other stuff goes down. There's a big action scene at the nightclub.
Yep.
Jenny gets kidnapped by Neville Sinclair, and then Jenny discovers while she's at his house that, spoilers, Neville Sinclair is a Nazi.
Right.
He's highly placed in the Hollywood scene because he's, as he mentions in the movie, he's the number 3 box office star in America. But it turns out he's a fascist Nazi.
Yes.
Secretly. So she finds this out. Meanwhile, Cliff Secord, he gets picked up by the FBI. They find him.
Right.
They take him to Howard Hughes. Howard Hughes explains the Nazis are trying to steal my rocket pack design because they've been working on their own rockets for years, but they haven't been able to get it right.
Right. As of yet, it's failed prototypes.
Right. But if they get a hold of my model, this is what's going to happen.
And he shows a wonderfully cheesy propaganda film.
There's like this animated propaganda film that the American agents stole from the Nazis, and it cost a man's life to get this out of Germany. Very reminiscent of many Bothans died to bring us this information. Yep. But it's this wonderful, like you said, cheesy, but it's really cool animated little short movie. It's like maybe a minute and a half long about what the Nazis think.
It shows a whole bunch of Iron Mans flying.
Yeah, like all these Nazis with jetpacks taking over America, burning down the White House.
The swastika over the White House.
Yeah, exactly. And like it's very, very flavorful, and it gives, again, the audience the idea of this is what's at stake.
Right.
And again, this entire movie, like the mob and Neville Sinclair, they kidnap Ginny. So there's personal stakes for Cliff. But we also understand why the Nazis want to get a hold of the rocket because of what they're going to do. Again, this movie, we understand what's at stake. We understand what's at risk and the consequences and the motivations of everybody involved. Unlike some movies that we've talked about in the past.
Yep.
You understand everything that's going on this entire film. So Cliff basically tells Howard Hughes and the FBI, look, I'll give you your rocket back tomorrow, but I've got to go
I got to use it.
I got to use it one last time. I got to go meet the mob and Neville Sinclair, and I've got to let them at least think that I'm going to hand over the rocket because I have to save Jenny. He escapes out of there, meets the mob and Neville Sinclair at the observatory up on the hill for the final showdown. And when he arrives, Eddie Valentine, Neville Sinclair, and all the mob dudes are standing around. Cliff Secord shows up, and he says, let Jenny go first. And they're like, Eddie Valentine goes, stop playing around, kids, so we can all go home. And then Cliff, who's figured everything out, says, what's it like working for a Nazi, Eddie? Huh? He pay you in dollars or Deutschmarks? And Eddie's like, what's he talking about? He doesn't know that Neville Sinclair is a Nazi.
Right.
Just like everybody else doesn't know.
Which I believe there's a line earlier on where it hints at, like, I think it's during like the club scene where it hints at Eddie's patriotism.
Yeah, a little bit. And then it comes into play here where he says, I might not make an honest buck, but I'm 100% American.
Yeah.
Let the girl go. And they all draw their guns on Sinclair.
And Sinclair says, who cares who you're getting your money from as long as you're getting it. This amazing...
Yeah, it's just this little really great exchange of dialogue. And then, but of course, it's a trap. It's a trap! Neville Sinclair yells some stuff in German, and a bunch of Nazi foot soldiers jump out of the bushes. Everybody's surrounded. But then, even better, the FBI shows up.
Then the Avengers show
right
up.
So it's like a Quentin Tarantino movie, man. Like there's everybody meets up at the end,
and then the enormous Zeppelin
the Zeppelin shows up, which is there to pick
Luxembourg or something like that.
I don't remember. Anyway, the Zeppelin shows up, and again, earlier in the movie, it's set up in that little preview
the giant Zeppelin.
that the Zeppelin's traveling the United States, and it's going to end its journey in Los Angeles, exactly where the movie takes place, putting in the fact that it's a giant ruse so they can pick up Neville Sinclair along with the rocket.
Right.
So Sinclair takes Ginny up to the Zeppelin. Meanwhile, Cliff gets distracted by fighting off some Nazi guys. The FBI is fighting against the Nazis. The mob's fighting against the Nazis.
Yeah.
And there's this great moment where Eddie Valentine and one of the FBI guys, they're both shooting Tommy guns at Nazis. You know, bruh, bruh, and they stop and they both look at each other and they kind of smile. Bruh, bruh, like the good guys and the bad guys, we're all fighting against the Nazis.
Right.
Again, just like this great like movie moment. I love it so much.
And then we get the greatest line in the whole movie from Eddie Valentine, which is the "Go get 'em, kid."
Yes. So yes, at my absolute favorite moment in all of cinema, Cliff Secord stands up. He has to run over and pick up the Rocketeer helmet, puts it on. The music crescendos and the Rocketeer theme starts playing.
Yeah.
And the FBI is like, we're losing them. Looking up at the Zeppelin that's getting away. And the guy's like, maybe not. Look. And the Rocketeer runs up, puts the gun in the holster. The American flag's waving behind him, and somebody from the crowd, look up there! It's the Rocketeer! And then ignites the jetpack and flies off. And Eddie Valentine's, go get him, kid.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
I love it so much.
It
is my
awesome,
favorite moment in all of movies.
It's super
I have the
well
biggest shit-eating grin on my face right now. I love it so much. So Cliff has to fly up to the Zeppelin, and he has to climb up. And as he flies up there, he accidentally gets caught on one of the cables, which rips part of the Zeppelin open. So the controls aren't working so well inside.
Right.
And the final climax takes place between Cliff Secord and Neville Sinclair. And Neville has Jenny. He's like, you need to take the rocket pack off and slide it towards me. And I forgot to mention this earlier.
Yeah, earlier on.
Yeah, earlier on, the rocket pack gets shot by accident. A bullet ricochets against it, and it puts a little hole in the fuel tank.
Right.
And something that's set up even earlier in the movie.
Yep.
Anytime that Cliff Secord flies, the GB flies the plane, he always takes chewing gum and he puts it on the tail for good luck.
Yep.
So the whole idea is that the chewing gum is good luck. So he does the same thing on the rocket pack. He puts the chewing gum on the rocket pack for good luck.
Yeah, because Peavy just like pulls it out of his mouth and like slaps it on it. He's like, that'll work.
Yep. Then there's a moment where when the rocket's damaged, Peavy takes the gum and he puts it over the hole in the fuel tank, which admittedly probably wouldn't work.
Right, it would definitely combust.
But for the movie, I'll take it, man. It's a quick fix,
Some
and I love
disgusting
it.
bubble gum in the 30s.
So when Cliff is handing over the rocket pack to Neville Sinclair, he kind of peels the gum ever so slightly up so the fuel starts to slowly leak out.
Right.
A fire starts inside the Zeppelin, and it's Neville, Jenny, and Secord. And Neville puts on the rocket pack and says, nope, I'm getting out of here.
And he goes, I'll really miss Hollywood.
I'll miss Hollywood, yeah. And then Jenny has a line where she goes, everything about you was a lie. And he goes, it wasn't lies, Jenny. It was acting. And he laughs maniacally, and he ignites the jetpack. I'll miss Hollywood. Flies off, and Cliff says, I don't think so. The rocket pack ignites. Sinclair starts screaming. And of course, he flies into the Hollywood land sign, which blows up the word land. And now it's just Hollywood. I love it. It's
really good.
It's so great.
Cheesy comic book villain death.
It's so great. So it looks like it's curtains for Jenny and Secord, but of course, at the last minute, who shows up but Peavy and Howard Hughes?
On like a weird
it's like a helicopter plane.
Bird
It's like a prototype thing. And they drop the ladder, they grab on, and as the Zeppelin's exploding, they get away in the climactic finale. And again, the music crescendos, and Moss smiles his big-ass smile, and it's great. And then at the end of the movie, Howard Hughes drops off a brand new plane for pilot Cliff Secord. Cliff is ecstatic that Howard Hughes gave him a plane.
Right.
And he doesn't even get a chance to thank him, as he tells Peavy, and Peavy just tells him, you don't have to, Cliff. He saw the look on your face. Our hero gets the girl, and everybody's happy, and the end of the movie, man. Rocketeer to the rescue, as little kids say as they're running around the plane.
Yep.
And the music starts playing, and the credits roll, and it's the best movie ever. I love it so much.
So we left out a big point with Lothar.
Yeah, so there's this big like Frankenstein's monster type dude who's like the main. This is
what I was talking about, where it's really this kind of is very comic book.
Yeah, he's the main muscle. He's this big like right hand man, beefy Frankenstein monster looking dude.
He just kind of mumbles,
but he's the muscle.
Yeah. So earlier on, he steals the jetpack plans from Peavy's house.
Yes.
And then they're stored at Sinclair's house, which Jenny steals before she leaves.
Yep.
And then she gives them
to Peavy at the end of the movie.
Who says, I think we can build a better one.
Clearly a setup for a sequel.
That never happened.
Because ultimately the movie did not make as much money as they wanted it to. It was originally a planned trilogy, but they canned it because the first one didn't make enough money. But it doesn't matter because it's still the best movie ever.
I think it's fine that there's no sequels to it. I mean, it sucks because it would have been nice to see more.
But it really works as a standalone film.
Yeah.
Like it really is this, it really encapsulates this period of history. 1938, Los Angeles, Hollywood. It's got, it has this perfect tone because it takes place in Los Angeles where movies are made.
Right.
And it's a movie that's a little bit about movies. We get to see the movie being made with Neville Sinclair as the actor. We get to see the Hollywood elite in the South Seas Club.
Yep.
We get to see, the classic jetpack and the iconic helmet of the Rocketeer and all the costumes and the set design. And it's so perfectly this period piece. And it really, really sets the mood and the fun of this movie.
And it's really strange because Joe Johnston went on to direct another film in the 1940s, Captain America: The First Avenger.
Yes, this movie directed by Joe Johnston, same guy who directed Captain America. And they have especially in the first half of Captain America, they have a very similar vibe and feel.
Yeah, you can definitely feel the similarity, but there's one big thing that Rocketeer nails that Captain America: First Avenger really sucks at. And that is the presence of two symbols. The American flag which was huge in the 40s,
Yes.
and the swastika, also huge in the 40s.
Yes.
That was kind of the big concept of good versus evil, and it's very present in The Rocketeer.
Yeah,
like
and
even the final bout, like you said, he flies up to the top of the observatory with the American flag flying in the background as
Yes.
he flies towards a Zeppelin with a swastika on it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Never really thought about it. Like the imagery of the American flag versus the Nazi swastika is very present, like at the very, very end of the movie when we find out Neville Sinclair is a Nazi, because we don't really see the swastika very much at all. There's a little bit in that little film at the beginning.
And then, I think it's on like a book.
Yeah, but that's
Neville
when
Sinclair's house.
and that's at the moment where we find out that he's a Nazi.
Right.
So once the audience and the characters in the movie figure out the twist of the movie, that imagery really comes into play, and it really hammers home the struggle and the conflict of ultimate good versus ultimate evil.
Yeah.
And it's so well done. You're so right.
It's a time that patriotism was super important for the country. And Captain America doesn't have it, which is really strange.
Because they really got away from the Nazis, and it was more about Hydra.
Yeah, but even though Red Skull was a right-hand man for Hitler.
Yeah, but
it's weird that they avoided it so much when they could have had such a cool opportunity.
Yeah, it very much feels like they kind of pulled their punches in First Avenger. Like they didn't want to rely too much on the Nazi imagery.
He punches Hitler in the movie. I mean, come on.
And in this, and in the Rocketeer, like they really use that iconic imagery to really sell home the idea that this is, the good guy Americans versus the evil Nazis.
I mean, it sets up the whole World War II motif.
Yes.
This is a World War II setting film. It's before we were even enemies.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's kind of this cool way to see, this is kind of the start,
Yeah, it's before the war.
The small start of, America fighting the Germans.
Exactly. It's like you said, it's before the war, but you still get the idea that there's certain characters in the movie that they really don't like the Nazis. Like they don't like what they stand for. Cliff Secord with his comments in the movie theater, Eddie Valentine with I'm 100% American. You really get that vibe. But at the same time, patriotism doesn't dominate the movie. Like you don't get the sense of nationalism.
Like the Spider-Man trilogy. we had 9/11 happen near the first Spider-Man movie, and for each subsequent film, he swings in front of an enormous American flag in each movie, and it's super distracting.
There's that, or even to a much more extent, any Michael Bay Transformers movie where there's a million American flags
and just
all over the
shots
place.
Of the U.S. Army or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. This is very, very tastefully done. It's there, and it's that iconic imagery, but it doesn't overshadow everything else that's going on in the movie.
It wouldn't really fit for that time.
It really wouldn't. It wouldn't fit the tone of the movie, because ultimately the movie is about Cliff Secord and, the people close to him and his struggle to really save the girl, save his girlfriend, Jenny Blake.
The whole America versus Germany thing is just kind of a small thing that's kind of in the end, which just amplifies.
It's flavor. Yeah. It's definitely, it builds into what's going on, but that's not the main struggle.
No, and it just helps.
Mm-hmm.
It helps the desire to bring down Timothy Dalton.
Yeah, for sure. Who is so good in this movie?
Oh, he's such a cocky little douchebag.
Yeah, I mean, he's very much playing, again, I mentioned earlier.
He quotes his movie to pick up chicks.
That is perfect, yeah.
Love it.
When he's trying to seduce Jenny, he's using lines from his movies, but she's such a huge fan of his and a movie buff.
She's picking him up.
She's calling him out. One? Yeah, she's calling him out oh, you said that to the one actress at the top of the Empire State Building in that one movie.
And he's yeah, but you're blah, blah, blah. And she's oh, from that movie last year. I saw that.
Yeah, and he's oh, great. Let's get you some more alcohol. Right. It's just, he really is this kind of this slimy asshole. Yeah. But he plays it so well. Very much so like he does in Hot Fuzz, or he just plays the sleazebag, but the still charming sleazebag, so well in this movie.
Yeah, he's super good.
Yeah.
They're all super good.
Everybody's really good. Alan Arkin as Peavy, he's sarcastic, but he's
like a father figure.
Yeah, he's got a lot of good lines. Yeah, he's just really good friends to Cliff, but he is kind of a father figure because he is a little bit older, and he is kind of there's that great part where Alan Arkin is talking to Terry O'Quinn. So Peavy's talking to Howard Hughes, and he's showing Howard Hughes oh yeah, this is how I improved the rocket pack. I just took this valve and I moved it over here, and Howard Hughes goes, well, that's a genius move, PV. And he's like, oh, it's just basic aviation, Howard, nothing to it. And he's talking to Howard Hughes, the father of aviation.
And just like a down home kind of guy.
Yeah, like just so many really, really great moments in this movie. You got Jennifer Connelly, and you got Timothy Dalton, Alan Arkin, and Paul Sorvino. Like, there's so many great roles, and everybody's just this great character, but never does it get super over the top or super, super corny. I mean, it's definitely a little cheesy.
Yeah.
But it's the flavor on top of the entree that is the Rocketeer.
Yeah, and I think if you go into this movie knowing that this is supposed to be a 1940s feeling. It's supposed to be like a serial, Dr. Frankenstein monster is supposed to look like that.
Yes.
Stuff like that. Like, his costume is supposed to look thrown together, even though it looks fantastic and it's aged wonderfully. Like, if you go in not expecting The Dark Knight, but expecting just like a good, solid, fun flick, like, you'll love it.
Yeah, very much so.
There's not a scene where Timothy Dalton broods for an hour.
and this movie, like, for me in my childhood, this movie very much was my Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Mm-hmm.
You talk to people who were, there's a guy I work with who eventually I want to have on the podcast someday, but he tells me about the first time he saw Star Wars or he saw Raiders of the Lost Ark when he was a kid, and the feelings that he had and how he loved that movie so much. And The Rocketeer was my Raiders of the Lost Ark. Like, I used to watch this movie all the time as a kid, and probably more so than any other film, maybe only equal to Star Wars, more so than any other film, The Rocketeer influenced my taste and my appreciation of movies and of storytelling and of superheroes and of tone and of period and time and place and setting. And like, this movie really shaped and molded my view and my opinions on how to make a great movie and how to tell a great story and how to have fun with it.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what this movie is. It's all of the best parts of storytelling and film and humor and great characters and just fun and adventure rolled into a single hour and 40 minutes. And again, you can tell just by listening, like, I have a smile on my face the entire time we're recording this podcast.
Yeah, it's a solid film.
I love this movie so much. I really, really do. Even down to the special effects in this movie, which, to be honest, there aren't really too many. It's
just a lot of the flying.
Yeah, a lot of the flying that involves the rocket pack, and then a lot of the stuff with the Zeppelin at the end.
Yeah. Which,
rewatching, I just rewatched this last night before we recorded. Like, the Zeppelin stuff is really, really good. Like, everything, obviously it's like superimposed onto the screen, like, as the Zeppelin's flying and that sort of thing. Right. And you got to remember, this is 1991. Like, CG is not really a thing at this point. But like, that's Zeppelin's
thing.
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit
bad thing.
It was a very bad thing. But that's Zeppelin's flying around, and like, it's smooth. It doesn't look, jarring or choppy.
It doesn't stick out. It's lit very well.
Yeah, like, they did a really, really good job. And all the stuff with the flying and the rocket pack, like, clearly there's green screen or blue screen going on. But what I really like about the special effects in this film is that they didn't attempt to do anything that they couldn't do.
Right. They didn't overuse the rocket.
Yeah.
Whereas they could have. They could have had a lot of shots with him flying. So it's like Superman 78 was the big first thing where, you'll believe a man can fly and that stuff like that.
Yeah.
Superman 4, the Quest 4 piece, well, its flying looks like crap. And I feel like this flying looks more polished than that.
Oh, absolutely.
Even though I would argue that it maybe looks about on par with the first one. Maybe it looks a little bit better than the first Superman film.
Yeah. Like, it's clearly, while we were watching it, like, it clearly stands out that, like, yeah, this is a special effect.
Right.
But they didn't go so over the top. The shots that they choose and the editing and the angles, they really edited around the fact that, look, the special effects look like they look.
Right.
They didn't try, it's not like the movie that always comes to mind when I think really terrible special effects from the 90s.
Is The Mummy Returns?
No, is Spawn.
Oh,
so,
God.
Right.
Jeez.
Exactly. Like, in Spawn, when there's like the demon from hell or whatever, like,
no, it is not a demon from hell.
You're just like, what did you,
or the cape.
Like, who signed off on this?
See, I always think of The Mummy Returns, where the Mummy, the first one, had that really cool shot with the sand.
Yes.
With the giant face in the sand. And the one where Returns infamously has the Scorpion King in it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
The Scorpion King just looks like garbage.
It looks really rough.
And so do the little, I guess they're supposed to be like pygmies. I don't know what they are.
I know what you're talking about,
They're like little demon things that attack them in the forest.
Yeah.
All looks like garbage.
Yeah, looks real rough.
Like,
but
they don't try that.
yeah.
Lothor is another thing that they could have easily made a CG thing, but it's just a guy.
Yeah, it's
makeup.
prosthetics and makeup.
Yeah, and the guy's a big guy because I think his name's like Little Ron or something like that.
Tiny Ron, I think.
Yeah,
is what everybody calls him.
He's a bigger guy, but they just put prosthetics on him.
Yeah,
and made him look like an even bigger kind of monster.
Yeah, and they didn't really go super over the top with it, and you buy it, like you believe it. In this again kind of like comic booky, slightly cheesy movie, you buy it and you buy the special effects. And what you said earlier, kind of the minimalist usage of the rocket pack. I think that's a really, really big thing that this movie does really well. Like very reminiscent of the original Star Wars trilogy and the lightsaber. Mm-hmm. Like in the prequel movies, there's a lightsaber every 10 seconds.
Right.
So it really loses its specialness.
Kind of like the Ghostbusters in the Proton Pack.
Yeah, exactly. Like
it's very little use in the first Ghostbusters.
Yeah, it's used very, very sparingly. So when the Ghostbusters use their Proton Pack, or when Luke Skywalker draws his lightsaber, or when Cliff Secord puts on the rocket pack, it's special, and it really means something. And
it's business time.
And the movie really builds to those moments. Again, when the music kicks up and the storyline kind of goes to the point where, hey, he really needs to put on the rocket pack. There's that moment in the movie where Cliff Secord talks to Peavy, and he's never flown with a rocket yet, and he rockets in the tool shed, right? And the music, and Peavy's like, yeah, why? And Cliff Secord takes off running towards the shed, and we, the audience, know, oh man, he's about to put on the rocket pack and we're going to see him fly.
Right.
And it's this big moment. And, he really only puts on the rocket pack, I think, 3 times in the entire movie.
Yeah, it's like the saving the
pilot. The airfield at the club briefly,
and then
the finale. Yeah. And that's really it. And it makes all those moments where he's using the rocket pack and flying really, really impactful and really, really unique.
Because it makes it about him. It makes the film about Cliff Secord.
Right.
Not the Rocketeer.
Right.
It's just Cliff Secord is the Rocketeer.
Yeah. But it's very much reminiscent of like how Batman Begins is really about Bruce Wayne. And the Dark Knight is really about Bruce Wayne and the Joker. But it's about the character. It's not about the costume. Even though the costume is amazing and iconic, and the imagery very much sells that movie.
He spends just as much time in the costume as he does outside of it. In fact, he even spends more
time outside of it. But he is Cliff Secord.
Right.
Like you said, he's not the Rocketeer. Cliff Secord just happens to be the Rocketeer. And the movie really, really is about him. But again, going back to the sparing use of the rocket pack, very much like the lightsaber usage in Star Wars, it really, really makes those moments unique. And again, it's a really, really good way to tell the story and to keep the tone flowing and really just keep the excitement of, the big moments are the rocket pack.
Right.
The big moments are the starships and the lightsabers. The big moments are the proton packs and using the ghost trap. Like those moments are the crescendos, like they're the peaks.
Right. You don't start at 10.
Right. Yeah. You have to build to your characters. You have to have these kind of lower moments of dialogue and exposition that's weaved brilliantly into this movie. Just through dialogue and the character interactions and the humor, you find out so much about who these people are and what their motivations are without having to sit down and explicitly spell it out.
Right.
I always go back to Obi-Wan Kenobi and Luke Skywalker in that scene where Obi-Wan is explaining to Luke, this is who your father was. We fought in the Clone Wars together. This is a lightsaber.
Yep.
Like Luke is learning all of this information about his father, who he has a strong desire to find out more about and to emulate. And we, the audience, are finding out more about what happened in the past in this universe, but also what kind of character Obi-Wan Kenobi is.
Right.
And what his relationship is ultimately going to be to Luke, and why the relationship between these two characters is so important.
But Luke also knows a lot of the information that we don't know, which is cleverly presented in ways of addressing things that Obi-Wan is saying in ways that is not just like, let's sit you down and explain things. It's clearly Luke is informed, and plus we get to know the gravity of some of the things that Obi-Wan is telling him.
Yeah.
Like the Clone Wars line. Like when Obi-Wan goes, oh yeah, blah, 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 we fought. And Luke's like, my dad fought in the Clone Wars? Like it's like a shock. It's like, you're telling my dad was like, you guys did this kind of stuff. Like, that's really cool. But it shows that he knows it. It's a better way of doing exposition instead of someone just walking up being like, you've always been like this since your dad passed away in that car accident 3 years ago to this date.
Right, when there's like expository dialogue that no one would ever need to have.
Right, or ever would say in any kind of situation.
Yeah, it's conversations between two characters. It's dialogue that's written well in service to advancing the knowledge that the characters have, advancing the knowledge that the audience has of the characters, and advancing the plot and advancing the story.
Right.
And every single scene in The Rocketeer does exactly that. It just keeps building on top of itself. Like I said before, the domino effect of everything that happens in the scene prior leads into the next scene.
Yeah.
There's all these little details. Like I picked another one up watching it last night where Eddie Valentine's at the club with one of his guys and the guy's on the phone and he hangs up the phone and he says, okay, and turns to Eddie and says, hey, Spanish Johnny, one of the other mobsters, he's going to go over to the diner and check out, see if he can find anything on Secord. And it's like a 2-second line that's just given to Eddie Valentine so that Eddie Valentine's like, okay, I understand what's going on. I know where he's going. But we, the audience, also get set up for the fact that 2 scenes from now, when Spanish Johnny shows up at the diner, we know why. We know where he's coming from. Like, the entire movie is this way.
Right.
I
It's
fucking love this movie.
There's no question of like, well, how does he know they're there? Like, why is he here? Oh, that's really lucky he just shows up here.
Right. The audience is given all of the information, most of the time, a scene or two in advance.
Right.
So when things are happening, it just all flows so well. The screenplay is so good.
Well, and we were talking about this before we started like doing this episode about how the twist is cleverly handled.
Yes.
The twist has hints. The Nazi propaganda is put in front of a Neville Sinclair film.
Yeah, and even if it's not strictly like him doing it,
it's
like
association. You're saying Nazi symbol, Neville
Sinclair. Exactly. Like the movie drops these hints and these little foreshadows, and then again we get the idea that Cliff really doesn't like the Nazis in a time where that was not necessarily the most popular opinion in the U.S.
Right, and then when Neville Sinclair turns out to be a sympathizer or even a higher up member, it's not a twist. It's not like an M. Night Shyamalan twist where it's like,
right,
wow, it's stupid. It's like a M. Night Shyamalan early career twist where it's like, wow, that's really smart.
Right. It's not like it comes out of nowhere. Like it comes out of the plot making sense and leading to that moment, but also we as the audience can accept and understand it and even be shocked by it because like you said, it was breadcrumbed earlier with that Nazi propaganda film at the very beginning of the Neville Sinclair movie. We associate those two ideas next to each other. So psychologically and even subconsciously, when it turns out that Neville Sinclair is a Nazi at the end of the movie, it totally makes sense and it totally works with us in our brains as we're watching the movie.
Yeah, so it's more Sixth Sense and less Signs.
Or Lady in the Water.
Or
The Village. Or The Happening. Or Devil.
Or Visit.
Or all of those garbage movies.
He has 2 good ones.
I didn't even like Unbreakable that much, man.
Yeah, well, you gotta watch yourself. That's when it comes out compared to the other ones.
Oh, compared to the other ones, yeah. Like I think
it's fine.
The premise is awesome.
Yeah.
Execution, Same thing
it's
like Highlander, okay? It's like Highlander. They're both about guys who can't be killed.
Right.
Execution, not so much. Idea, very cool.
There's a lot of shitty moments in Unbreakable.
Yeah, for sure. You hear that, M. Night Shyamalan? Unbreakable is Highlander.
Yeah.
You ripped it off.
Last Airbender sucked too.
It did.
We've already talked about that though.
But again, The Rocketeer is a fucking great movie.
Right.
Like I love it so much.
Its twist was great. It's a clever twist. It's a wonderfully placed twist in its timeline, especially in the timeline of the film.
Yeah.
But also in the timeline of the world the film takes place in. Like it's wonderfully set up.
Yeah, and it's an example of so the twist is that Neville Sinclair is a Nazi. The movie takes place in 1938 when, Nazis were kind of at the height of their power with, Hitler taking over and all that good stuff. And in that time period, when you went to watch a movie, there were propaganda films. Right. There were advertisements for things that were happening around the world because you couldn't go home and watch the news. You couldn't get online and on Facebook and check out to see what's happening around the world. People got their news by going to the movies in that time period. And Neville Sinclair is this classic, Errol Flynn-esque actor who stars in these, golden age Hollywood films, which throughout the movie we kind of get an insight into the golden age of Hollywood in a comedic sense. But it's a great example of taking okay, here's the twist of our movie, here's some details from the time period, and we're going to amalgamate them and kind of put them together.
We're going to put them in this where it's going to make sense and it's going to work.
And it's going to
for the
fit
benefit of the film.
Yeah, and it's going to fit the tone of our movie. Like, it's such a brilliant way to take ideas of telling a story and ideas of historical accuracy and melding them together to really make your movie that much more on a higher echelon. And this movie does this the entire runtime, and it's so great. Watch this movie if you've made it this far and you haven't paused and watched The Rocketeer. Do it right now.
Or watch X-Men 2.
Sure.
X-Men United.
Because that's relevant.
I was going to say X-Men, but I hate X-Men.
The X-Men one's pretty rough nowadays.
Do you know what happens to a toad in a thunderstorm?
Do you know what happens to a toad when it gets struck by lightning?
That's what it is.
The same thing that happens to everything else.
Fuck you, Halle Berry.
That could be a good line if it was delivered by not a terrible actress.
Like Paul Rudd.
Paul Rudd was probably really young when that movie came out. That's like
It's
like Clueless era Paul Rudd.
Rudding it up.
He was rudding it up. He's always rudding it up.
He is.
Ant-Man 2, rudding it up.
Ant-Man and Wasp, rudding it up. Avengers 3, rudding it up.
So, if you couldn't tell from the hundreds of times I've already said it this episode, The Rocketeer from 1991 is my favorite movie of all time. If you haven't seen it, you really,
Soon to be
really...
replaced by the 2018 one.
We'll see. But I don't really care that the movie's coming out. I will clearly see it because it's a Rocketeer movie.
They're going to call it like the Rocketeerette.
Nah, they'll probably
or
call
the
it
Lady Rocketeer.
They'll probably call it like the Rocketeer, and then it'll have like some sort of like
Returns.
the Rocketeer, the Winter Soldier, or something. You know,
Rocketeer Civil War,
something along those lines, because it's going to take place in the Cold War. So it'll probably have like the Rocketeer and then like a subtitle.
The Rocketeer, Stalin sucks.
I don't think they'll call it just straight the Rocketeer again. They might. You know, the Rocketeer in parentheses 2018. The Rocketeer, they won't do that because no one's familiar enough. They definitely won't do that.
The Rocketeer 2, it's really kind of cold.
The Rocketeer, the second Avenger.
The second Avenger.
The second Avenger, yeah. So I love this movie. I think you love this movie too.
I do. It is one of my favorites.
And again, I know I talked a whole bunch about this movie, but I really, really do love it.
That's right. I'm going to replace another movie on your list whenever we do my movie.
So hopefully you enjoyed our discussion of The Rocketeer. Again, if you haven't seen it, please go out and see it. And when you do, let us know what you thought.
Yep.
You can find the show at POP RANT RADIO at Facebook, Twitter, and Gmail. Episodes of the show are also posted on our YouTube channel, along with a couple of other things that we've done. So check that out. Subscribe, like, comment, all that good stuff on there. You can always find the show at Libsyn, the website that hosts the show, as well as on iTunes. And if you're listening to us on iTunes, please rate, review. It really, really does help out the show.
Comment, subscribe,
send us cookies.
Yep.
Send us your firstborn.
Re-download.
All the good stuff. As always, thanks to Major for the theme songs.
Thank you, sir.
We appreciate it, man. We're going to thank you every week, as always. Other than that, that's the show for this week.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank you so much, everyone, for listening. We really, really do appreciate it. Thank you to everyone who has left reviews on iTunes. You're great. You're amazing.
The Rocketeer will join the Avengers?
No. Oh, but it is Disney, isn't it? Ooh.
Tony Stark's
you've just blown my mind,
Tony Stark's
my friend.
Your equipment looks like shit. What do they do that?
Well, what they get a time travel?
What Howard Stark builds his next suit?
Oh man, we'll see. I guess we'll see. So thank you everyone so much for listening. We really, really appreciate it. Before he's killed by the Winter Soldier. We super, super appreciate it, and we will see you next week.
Thanks guys, bye.